Hi everyone, welcome back to Atrium Research's YouTube channel. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Mark Jarvis, the President and Director of Giga Metals Corporation, which trades under the symbol GIGA, or Giga, on the TSXV. We currently have a buy rating and target price of 30 cents per share on the company. Mark, it's been a while since we caught up, but I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Ben. Yeah, a lot has happened since the last time we talked.
So with that, I know you have a presentation here to walk the viewers that are not up to speed on the story, get them sort of up to date, and then we'll get into some Q&A in the back half here, but I'll leave it to you to walk through the presentation here.
Great, well, thank you. So I've put together a very brief presentation because I'd like to get, spend some time in the Q&A, but this is a picture of the site. You can see our camp, you can see our airstrip, which is about 1 kilometer long. You can see the Turnagain River, and you can see the terrain, which is important. This is excellent open pit type terrain, and you'll see more about our location in a bit. So this is kind of the investment proposition. I'm certainly experienced, and we've got a new CEO who I reached out to, and Scott Lendrum has now replaced me as CEO. We'll get into that a bit later, but he's a former banker with a 20-year, very successful career with very interesting M&A experience. He lives in Toronto. And he's raised a lot of capital for the mining business. He's from a mining family in Saskatchewan. And so he stepped into this to steer the ship, and I am now playing more of a supporting role. We've got an established joint venture partnership with Mitsubishi Corp, one of the largest companies in the world, and they're not the car company, at least we're not that division. We're dealing with the commodities trader. And they have a model where they like to be a joint venture partner and pay their share. They like to have anywhere between 15 and 25% of a project. They don't want to operate, they don't want to build, but they're very supportive partners. And they want a piece of the project and as much of the offtake as they can get. So what we already have is a very large, long life nickel cobalt project. We've got good First Nations relationships. I've been talking to the First Nations up in this area for 20 years. And this is quite an advanced, PFS level, provincially recognized critical mineral project, and we've got a clear path to development. Now, that said, nickel is not in a good market right now, so things have slowed down on that side, but we're ready to go as soon as the nickel price picks up again, which inevitably will. Don't ask me the timing. But we also have, and I'll get into this later, significant exploration upside. This ultramafic complex is large, and we've barely touched it in terms of exploration. So we'll get into that somewhat. And so this is, what I'm talking about really is two strategic pathways. The nickel cobalt project, we have discussions going on with potential partners to step in. I think it's a good time for a partner to step in when commodity prices are low. That's the best time to develop a project and get it ready to go for when commodity prices pick up. Mm-hmm. And as I say, nickel is unusual in the base metals world because nickel is very low right now. But again, that's the best time. That's the best time to develop a project. So Scott has got all sorts of discussions underway. His contacts in the business are actually quite phenomenal. Now, on the other hand, I reached out last November, about a year ago, to an internationally recognized geologist, Dr. Stephen Beresford, and basically engaged him and said, what are we missing here? Can you review all of our data and advise us about how to look for high grade in the system? We know where the low grade is. And it's, we've got a surface deposit, very low strip ratio. We've got 30 years of mine life described in a pre-feasibility study. We can drill off more low grade if we want, but there's really no point at this, at this time. But where would we find high grade within this system? And he started looking at all of our data and came up with something surprising. He thinks, in addition to high grade nickel targets deeper in the system, he thinks we've got a potential copper deposit here. And that's where we focused for now, because it would be so nice to have that optionality of having copper as well as nickel. So that's the two paths that we're on, and they're both active. We've been actively exploring. We're going to be doing more exploration this coming year, but also the partnership discussions are ongoing. Partnership discussions never go quickly, but I can tell you that there are some very interesting discussions underway, led by Scott. So here we are, northern British Columbia, and we've got access to good infrastructure. We would plan to ship the concentrate out of Stewart, but we've also got access at Ketwanga to the railway line. We could run concentrate back east to Ontario if we wanted to, just whatever works out at the time. We're dealing primarily with two First Nations, the Tahltan and the Cascadena. They both claim traditional use of the project area, and so we're engaged with both of them. The provincial government really likes critical minerals, and they really like the idea of developing critical minerals projects in British Columbia. And to that end, an interesting recent development is the North Coast transmission line, which is going to essentially double the capacity from Prince George to the North Coast in phase 1 and 2. Phase 3 is running the extra capacity then up Highway 37 into the northwest, into the area where our project is. This is huge news for us. In our PFS, we modeled that we are paying for all of the infrastructure in terms of power lines and roads. But it looks like, a good part of the infrastructure at least is going to get paid for by the government, which makes sense. We've got, up in our area, we've got a lot of mineral projects hoping to get developed. And, you run the power line up there and just kind of light it up. There's even talk of extending the power line all the way to the Yukon, where there are opportunities for power generation that could sort of balance out the system by sending power south along the line, as long as, as well as just in one direction. And my understanding is that makes the whole system more resilient. Anyways, this is a federally recognized project now, and it just sounds like it's going to happen.
Amazing.
So I've already talked about Mitsubishi Corp. And this is the reserves statement from the PFS. So I think it's important to note we do have reserves. If you want to see all of the details of it, you can look at our pre-feasibility study, which is on our website. Now, talking to Dr. Beresford, you can see the outline of the ultramafic intrusive and the scale here. It's roughly 8 kilometers from one end to the other. And, most of it is prospective for nickel and cobalt. But we've got this one area. We did, a few years ago, we did a geochem survey over the whole ultramafic. And an area known as the attic zone lit up in terms of copper. And so that big copper anomaly that you can see on the screen is where the attic zone is. It's a separate pulse of the ultramafic. The model is that this ultramafic originated from deep. It was a magma chamber, but it was several pulses, the geologists think, from the same source, but over several million years. And so the source changed. And the attic zone, I think, is the most recent pulse, and it's completely different rocks from everything else within the system. And you don't see very much nickel or cobalt in this area, but you see persistent, certainly in the geochem, you see persistent copper, but also platinum and palladium. They seem to run together. And so what we wanted to do first, and this was on Dr. Beresford's advice, is run a couple of MT lines, which we ran, I think we finished at the end of October this year. And that took a while to get it processed and analyzed. But we ran those lines right across the ultramafic intrusive, but particularly in the attic zone, because we wanted to understand deeper structure. And the theory is that the ultramafic intrusive is quite resistive, whereas the surrounding rocks are quite conductive. And so there's a strong contrast, and it was felt that MT would be an excellent way to map out the structure at depth. And so here's the first line. You can see there was line 1 and line 2. This is the first line, and it worked. You've got a strongly resistive ultramafic intrusive surrounded by conductive rocks. And it mapped it out beautifully. Now, what this tells us is that Dr. Beresford's interpretation of the geometry of this system is correct. It's strongly supportive of his interpretation, which is that the ultramafic intrusive is in its original and upright position. It's sky facing. We had thought that it was rolled over on its side based on limited information. He came in and said, no, I don't think that's right. I don't think the data supports that. And then this MT analysis definitely supports his point of view. So what that means is we've got, untested basal contacts in here, and we've got the marginal contacts are largely untested to any depth. And those are interesting target areas. Now we'll look at line 2. So you're seeing that the whole thing is getting a bit shallower, a little bit more complex as we move north. And interesting, right in the center there's a feature that's much less resistive that comes fairly close to surface. We didn't know that was there. That's a new feature. And we're going to need to investigate that. You can also see there's a drill hole that we drilled historically. We drilled a few mostly shallow holes in this area, found sort of persistent low-grade copper, platinum, and palladium, but we didn't find any high-grade with that drilling campaign. This was a bit of a deeper hole, and you see it didn't quite come to this particular feature here. This is something that we're going to have to check out more. So while we're still on this, we're planning to do, and we funded this spring, we're going to do 2 or 3 more MT lines across this whole structure. Let me just go back to here. We're going to go up to the northwest. We're going to do a line further north, but we're also going to do a line off this particular feature where there's a buried mag feature that we'd like to know more about. We'd like to see the structure on that. And we're going to do a line to the south through the nickel area, this is the area where we've got our reserves from the PFS. We've got something like 350 drill holes in this area. So it'd be interesting to tie an MT line in with all of that drill data. Mm-hmm. And then the plan is that the MT will be followed. It will help us to know where to do ground-based EM that's deep penetrating. We're going to be using a system where we think we can see up to 800 meters deep. And so the MT is guiding where to do that. And then, that will help us to rank our drill targets. And then after that, the next step is drilling. And then here's our capital structure. So I'm going to stop sharing now. There we go.
There, you can see me again. Well, thank you, Mark, for that. And, that was a condensed presentation, but hit on all sort of the key points with what is actually quite a, complex story. Like you said, large, long life nickel cobalt project, but lower grade. And nickel obviously is out of favor right now, especially from a price perspective. So why not look at the surrounding area, the surrounding geology, try to find something higher grade that might boost the economics of that, as well as potentially bring in another metal into the fold that is priced a little bit better, which obviously copper is doing fantastic right now. So,
yeah. And if I can just add to that, Ben, the platinum and palladium seem to run with the copper. So where you get little spikes of high grade copper, the platinum and palladium also tend to spike. They tend to be correlated, and platinum and palladium are not doing badly right now either. So,
they've certainly bounced back quite significantly from falling off over the last year or two. So I did have a couple additional questions for you.
Sure.
Now, firstly, I guess staying away from the assets and everything that's going on site, maybe you can just talk about stepping back to the president role yourself and then bringing in Scott. I know you touched on it very briefly at the start of the presentation there, but what was the strategy around that? How has this transition gone over the summer, and what are you seeing from Scott these days?
Well, okay, where this all came from is I started working on this project in 2004. That's when I took over the company, got it back trading, started raising money. We had a heck of a run between '04 and '08. Raising money for nickel was quite easy then. That's when we did most of our drilling, started doing metallurgy and engineering. Nickel, as you know, is volatile. We had some quiet years from sort of 2013 to 17. Basically put the project on mothballs at that time. And then 2017, nickel started to come back with a lot of interest from the EV story. And suddenly we could raise money again. We got active again. And then we found Mitsubishi as a partner. But I guess the point is I've been working on this since 2004. I'm 71 years old. And I just, I reached a point where I went, okay, I've taken it this far. I've put a lot of work into this. I love this project. But am I the best CEO to continue to carry this project forward? And I concluded that I was not. So I set out and did, with the support of the board, and did a search for a new CEO. And I was specifically looking for a banker that had had a successful career and that now wanted to take on one of these little companies and do it himself. And I ended up finding Scott Lendrum. Just a ton of experience. He's done some very interesting M&A work in the past, particularly with nickel assets. And he's raised a lot of money over the years. And I found him at a point in his life and in his career where he was looking to do something different. And we started talking. He did a deep due diligence and decided to make the leap. And so that was last July, the beginning of July last summer was when he officially started. He started poking at it a little bit before then. But since he's come on board, all the money we've raised, the bulk of it has been him. And what I'm finding is that his contacts are quite amazing. I mean, he's worked at large banks. He's worked at, more boutique, institutional type firms. He even worked at, kind of a retail firm at one point. So he's got a pretty broad experience. And he's dealt with companies of all sizes. And what I'm getting is that he's quite well respected in the industry. So he can call the C-suite at large companies and get his call returned, which is something I couldn't do, you know? So I am just absolutely delighted with what he's done so far. He's raised money. He financed this exploration program that we've already done. He's financed the exploration program that we're about to do next spring. And I'm confident that he's going to finance the drill program that will follow that. He's got some very, very interesting discussions underway. So, and I'm still here, but I'm kind of doing the fun stuff. I don't have all the weight on my shoulders anymore. But I am British Columbia. Scott's in Toronto. I'm in British Columbia. I know the local politics. I understand the First Nations quite well. I've been dealing with the First Nations, with the Tahltan and the Kaska for 20 years. And so, you know, I understand the permitting environment, all of that sort of thing. So I'm here, you know, I just want him to succeed. I'm still the largest shareholder of this company, and I'm in it to win it. And I think I've got a better chance now that Scott's the CEO.
No, that's a great answer. Yeah, no, I think that's great, and you know, I think it does make sense from your perspective, as well as bringing someone in that maybe has more relationships to be able to advance this to the next stage, right? And a lot of what's going to happen over the next couple of years is, yes, of course, raising money to do the exploration that you walked us through in the presentation there, but then also, you know, like you said, have some conversations with these larger companies that could be acquisitive or could take a piece or help advance this project in, you know, whatever shape and form, is certainly good. And again, it brings in new connections. You still have yours, you have your knowledge base over the last couple of years, but then Scott can come in with different perspectives and different connections. So that's great. I guess just on, you know, the catalyst to come, you did sort of mention the 2 to 3 more MT lines that you guys want to run leading up to another plan to do some more deep EM surveys, and then those will ultimately drive drill targets, and you know, then you got to raise money, of course, to proceed with drilling. But am I correct in that sort of line of timelines?
Yeah, that's right. The next stage of geophysics is funded, fully funded. The drilling, you know, or rather Scott is already talking to some pretty large entities that, you know, I mean, I would like to go into once we get to the drilling phase, I would like to have a big budget for that.
Right.
You know, I'd like to test several targets, and, you know, because that way you improve your odds. It's just as simple as that. You know, and this is a large system. It's really about, it's such a huge unexplored volume. It's about, you know, kind of shrinking the search space. You know, going, okay, we're not going to drill here. Here's the areas where we think we can find high grade, and it's really high grade that we're looking for, not more low grade. And you know, there should be high grade nickel in the system, but also, according to Dr. Beresford, he sees a possibility. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I can't give you chapter and verse. I'm not a geologist, but it's a Volkovsky style massive copper magnetite type system in the Attic zone. And Volkovsky is a copper mine in the Uralian trend in Russia. So Beresford sees a lot of similarities between the Uralian ultramafic intrusives and the Alaskan style ultramafic intrusives, and thinks that these kind of systems find it much easier to make copper deposits, frankly, than nickel deposits.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, that's
Interesting.
exciting. He thinks it's hiding in here somewhere. He thinks the low grade at surface, where there's smoke, maybe there's fire. And so that's what we want to test.
Right. Right. Yeah, and certainly a new line of excitement and frontier for the business. But then, what investors should not forget about is that you're not some greenfields explorer, right? You've got this massive nickel deposit, even with reserves, in the resource. So it's a well-defined project. It's just not the right time given the nickel price. But that's not to say that even that project itself could be self-sustaining and turned into a multi-billion-dollar asset one day if the economics around the nickel price improve. And there's a lot of tailwinds that in the long run we think could improve. And so maybe just on that, while we have you, Mark, because I know you're pretty up to date on the nickel space, maybe you can touch on that for investors. What's your commentary around the nickel market over the next 3, 5, maybe even 10 years, if you do have an outlook?
Well, nickel continues to be the highest demand growth of the base metals. I think it's currently at 6%. And that's, it's still 60 or 65% of nickel use is stainless steel. That's driving it. But also EVs, even though, EVs have hit some speed bumps, it's still happening. EV use is still growing. You still, if you want real range in your EVs, you need nickel. Nickel, just the physics is that it's got excellent energy density. And so, the demand use just continues to grow at quite a torrid pace. The problem with the nickel market is that the supply response has been so strong from Indonesia, backed by Chinese money. And so, it's a lot of laterite nickel, which is nickel in dirt and clay, essentially. But they're surface deposits. They're easy to find. They're maybe 10 meters thick. And they go on and on, mile after mile. There's problems with them in that, a lot of them are under complex ecosystems called tropical rainforests. And basically they just go in there, they don't even cut the trees down. They push them down with bulldozers and pile them up and burn them. And then they dig out the dirt. They process it, at least the stuff that's going for the battery market, they process using high pressure, high temperature acid leach, a very aggressive processing route. And in many cases, they dump the tailings into the ocean. And they are polluting like crazy there, but yet the volume has continued to grow backed by Chinese money. And so, now that won't last forever. I don't know how long it lasts. But with every mining camp in the world, you tend to take the best stuff first, the highest grade, the stuff that's closest to infrastructure. That stuff gets developed first because you're looking for a return on capital, and then gradually the grades drop and you get farther and farther from infrastructure. And that's what's happening in Indonesia. I don't know how long that process takes. But also, the way I would put it, and continue to put it, is there's a joker in the deck, which is if the Indonesian government decided to get serious about environmental protection of their villagers. I mean, there's water supplies being poisoned by the mining activity. This is well documented. You push down these tropical rainforests, and aside from the loss of biodiversity, it rains a lot in Indonesia, and then you get mudslides that engulf villages and kill people. It's I don't know, if this is your source of nickel for batteries, then you're not saving the planet by buying an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
And almost every car maker in the world is sourcing their nickel ultimately from Indonesia. So, if they decided to get serious about supply side management or even just serious about, the environment in Indonesia, that could slow down this whole process of, it's just the Wild West there right now in terms of mining. And if it did
Right.
that, I think nickel would have a very strong response. They haven't
Right.
done it yet, but, next Tuesday they might, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's that. It's either the nickel price will either improve slowly and gradually, or it could improve all at once. And that would be interesting to see. But in the meantime, you know, we're exploring for copper. So,
Yep.
and it's not just copper. I mean, if there's high grade nickel hiding in the system, we're focused on the copper, but there's going to be some high grade nickel targets, I'm pretty sure, is going to come out of all of this. And if you get high enough grade, it doesn't matter what the price is. You can get this whole thing off the ground if you can start with any kind of high grade underground mine, be it copper or nickel. They're much easier to permit. There's much less surface disturbance, much lower capex, and yet the cash flow that can be generated by a high grade underground mine is phenomenal. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's always been the case. If you could find high grade within this system, it's just incredible leverage.
No, well, that was some interesting commentary, on the nickel price and whatnot. And I think for everyone's sake, there can be, or hopefully is in the future, more strict environmental regulations over there. But I think what that also points to is what we're seeing more commonly and a larger push for in North America is, bringing some of that supply onshore, and it goes beyond just, having that domestic supply, but even from an environment perspective, us producing or Canada producing nickel here is going to be far better for the environment than it being produced, outside of North America or in some of these less, sophisticated jurisdictions, if you want to call it that. But, like you said, you've got to move this project forward. You've got to continue working for shareholders. And if nickel isn't favorable from a pricing perspective, you can look to copper, which is doing fantastic. And there's a ton of tailwinds behind the copper price, even beyond where it is today, well above, I believe, $5 per pound. So, if a discovery can be made on the copper side of things, I think investors and shareholders would be rewarded accordingly. And even lastly, this was something that I wasn't too up to date on, was that North Coast transmission line that both benefits the project from a cost perspective, and even, environmental, having being fully connected to the grid has a whole bunch of tailwinds on the environmental side of things.
Well, sure. If
I
just
guess.
to that, just briefly.
Please.
In our PFS, we were almost 2 billion capex, US, 1.9 billion, but roughly 10% of that was infrastructure costs, capex for
Right.
power lines and roads. And so certainly with what's going on,
It's a big number.
And the power line's the big one. The roads, this is easy road building country. It's not, it's not a huge number for the roads, but it's not insignificant. It's just the power line's bigger. Well, certainly at least half of that power line cost is going to go away. I mean, if the government was serious about, helping critical mineral mines by developing infrastructure, it would be about 200 million would disappear from our financial model.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a very direct impact on the financials of this project. That's a great tailwind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, more news from a government perspective supporting mining companies, getting these projects moving forward more quickly on the permitting and whatnot perspective as well is great to help elevate companies like Giga. So with that, Mark, I didn't have any other questions. Was there any sort of closing remarks you wanted to wrap up on?
I think we've covered it. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, great. No, I appreciate it. And for investors, if you haven't seen our research on Giga, if you'd like to get up to speed, our initiation report as well as the other research notes to follow can be found on our website at atriumresearch.ca. And with that, Mark, I appreciate the time today.
Ben, thank you once again.